Hi guys, Paul Seils. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us for the webinar with Mr. Warren Black on the Great Reset, the coming dark winter. Hey Warren, are you there? Thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Paul. Great to be here.
So many people have got many preconceptions. It's interesting, even when we were advertising this webinar and this event, that people were sort of actually think it was a webinar promoting the Great Reset, copying a lot of flack and a lot of abusive messages from people. So, what is the Great Reset? Well, can I get you on? Can I get you on screen, or are you going to run your slides?
Oh, mate, absolutely. Let me just get up my my screen.
Okay.
I'll get my camera up too, if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll do the camera first, and also if anyone can just jump in the chat box if you're online there at the moment, and just jump in the chat and say hey.
Okay, so yeah, hi everyone, and thanks for coming. So yeah, look, if you don't mind, Paul, I'll get underway. Do you want me to just share? So look, thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Paul, for having me here. And it's great, as I was just telling Paul before we started, that I like the fact that we've got people like Paul and others getting out there to get the message out, because if you've got 100 people doing it or 1,000 people doing it in their own way, I honestly believe we can make a major change and bring a shift in this whole thing. Because what you're about to hear today, my guess is probably all of you know something about it, but the prognosis is pretty grim of what this actually means. So without further ado, what do I mean?
There's some good news and opportunities at the end, I hope, Warren. It's not all going to be
very
bad
good
news.
news.
Okay.
No. I'm very optimistic in terms of opportunities. There's probably more good news than bad news. It's just that it's a little bit like knowing you've injured yourself and you've got to heal your injury, Paul. But once you heal your injury, there's even better days ahead, rather than pretending there's no injury. Does that make sense?
Great. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So today we'll be covering the injury that this Great Reset means and how it will injure humanity and injure our finances, but how we can protect ourselves and look after our financial health, so to speak, and not only not be affected by it, but be in better health than ever before. So this disclaimer just says I'm not a licensed financial planner, just to be clear on that one. So any advice which I'm giving is basically around taxes. Anything outside of that when it comes to finances is educational only. So in this 45-minute presentation, I'm just going to be covering in a very general way a bit about what the Great Reset is, and hopefully you probably already know it, but hopefully it'll add something else to what you don't already know, about why the Great Reset is an inevitable fall into an ice age or dark winter, the radical steps being taken by the rich to protect their wealth from the Great Reset, how you can protect your wealth and get specialist help and actually take advantage of opportunities. I mean, we're seeing some extraordinary opportunities. In fact, so much so, just to give you an idea, Paul and everyone else, even my teenage sons are seeing it right now, and they've been keen to learn more about cryptos, private equity investment, because right now they said to me, we can even see the opportunities that are ahead. Because when the world is changing form radically like it is right now, what this actually means is that there's opportunities to be part of the changeover or the great wealth transfer. So the training will go for about 45 minutes, 45 minutes, and it's basically a gift to help everyone out. At the end, if anyone wants some specialized help or to join any of the works that we're doing, you'll be given that opportunity, and then you can contact us and have a no obligation call. So regardless of whether you do that or not, it's going to give you a lot of value, hopefully. So just some background about me. I've been doing this for well over 30 years now, would you believe it? I worked for the tax office for 10 years. I used to be a lawyer. I used to be an accountant. And I've been involved in everything from Australian tax planning, offshore planning. And in fact, overall, my life has been about, and why I resonate so much with Paul's messages from the underground. The underground is exactly what I always described my transformation. In 2001, after leaving the tax office and spending 2 years working in private law firms and feeling a bit miserable and feeling frustrated and having all kinds of personal crises, I joined an underground movement myself, which transformed my thinking. I learned crazy stuff like about the truth about the ATO, the truth about the government, the truth about how our legal system really worked. I learned about offshore banking world. I learned about the offshore structuring world. I learned about the private equity investment world. I even learned about cryptocurrencies, and my whole mind was blown wide open. And I discovered there was a whole world that operated well outside the mainstream world I'd been living in. I learned about vaccinations, which up until then I'd been a strong proponent of it, and learnt some truths about vaccinations from a evolved chiropractor doctor I met who opened my eyes. There's just so many things that changed in that time, which got me on the path of learning offshore structuring and tax planning and international investing, not just from the point of view of a mainstream accountant, lawyer, planner, but actually sitting with people who, in some cases, lived invisible lives or off the radar, almost impossible to track. One guy that we actually met actually lived in the South Island, used a Motorola phone, was almost untraceable. So I've met all kinds of people and worked with all wide ranges of people in every way, shape, and form. So what I'm sharing today is from a mixture of a professional experience as having worked as an accountant, lawyer, and licensed planner in the past, as to now where I've chosen to give up my licenses now, so to speak. I work now in the firm I started, WealthSafe, as a licensed accountant under the girl I actually trained up. I sold half the business to her, and now that's freed me up to run more sovereignty, wealth, education works to help humanity at this time. So the big problem that we're facing right now, and what lies ahead for the world, is this thing called the Great Reset. Now, there's an old saying in the Bible that says that through ignorance my people perish. It's ignorance and a lack of knowledge that I believe is what's going to basically get humanity into a lot of trouble. Is that people don't really understand what's happening, and those who do think they do, but don't really. And I don't say that arrogantly. I say that from someone who sat in underground movements. I've been shown history books that before 1914 that have since been deleted and removed out of publication. And there's so much that I've seen that for a while made life very challenging for me until I actually stepped in and realized that this knowledge was given for a reason. So the point is, these resets are diabolical as to what they mean. And this is not a new thing. That's the first thing I want to mention. This isn't some strange thing that's suddenly been pulled out of someone's ass, which is being brought in. This has been done over and over and over again for thousands of years in multiple economy when you're using what's called a fractional fictitious monetary system. In other words, not a system that's based on true barter or exchange of gold, currency, or a food or a currency of some change, but where you effectively centralized the money system to a group of people who not only control the real wealth, but pretty much print fictitious money over the top, and to the point where really we're living in a game of monopoly, which means that pretty much that the game of monopoly can be restarted any time that the elite want this to be started again. There was a wonderful message taught in our Global Wealth Club 2 weeks ago by a guy who works with 100 million net worth people, generally as a minimum, who's a friend of mine. And he said the best way to think of the world right now is you've got the 1% that we call Mr. Global, who control the world. We've got the 4% who are what's called the oligarchs, or the big techs, or the super wealthy, who work closely with Mr. Global. And of the remaining 95% is about 15% who are what's called the current awakened business investor people who see what's going on but aren't part of Mr. Global or the oligarchs, but see what's going on. And the 80% that basically by and large are slaves and will do whatever they're told in some form. And the basic aim of the Great Reset is to not only take full control of the 80%, but knock out some of the 15%. That's the basic aim. So this is something, if you're not prepared for this, and if you're not really aware of what a reset means, it pretty much means recommencing the game of Monopoly and starting all over again from scratch. That's what it actually means. And as Bradley puts here, the Great Reset is a perversion of the old biblical jubilee. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So absolutely, yeah, no, I agree, Brad, like noticing how the tech censorship and everything had to be built first. So if you don't understand the reset and how it's going to work and how you can look after yourself, you will, like what happened in the Great Depression, what's happened time and time again, you start with nothing. And it works very well for the poor lower middle class who are disgruntled, who are very angry, who are wounded, who are scared, who feel like capitalism failed them. And unfortunately, my opinion, and I think why some people misconstrue me as socialist, I've had that happen to me, is I do think capitalism has failed many people. Because I think, unfortunately, that with capitalism, we get so excited with the prospects of wealth that many end up getting caught up with all kinds of luxuries, and we forget about the need to use our wealth, not just for our own enjoyment and happiness, but to make a difference. And so I do think that what's happened, and generally historical civilization collapses happen when capitalism gets so intense in that way that there's a group missing out. So my personal belief is solving the Great Reset is actually going to require a change of mindset in just about everyone and everything. So first and foremost is changing the mindset. Secondly, it's actually taking the practical solutions that's needed. So we all know this. I don't need to tell anyone here. I'm preaching to the converted. Most of the wealthy that we work with have been moving their asses off because they see what's coming. They can see the problems. Many of them are moving to this world of sovereign nations because, as Stephen Pettit said in our class 2 weeks ago, my friend who works with 100 million net worth, he said that basically in the next 10 years, he sees the world divided up into three. There'll be the New World Order group, there'll be the China group, and then there'll be the sovereign nation group. And the sovereign nation group, oh, there's a feedback here. The sovereign nation group will actually be by and large, will be people who found a way out of the Great Reset. So the sovereign nation individual groups. And that's what I'm talking to today. Those who are like, we're not going to be part of the New World Order group. We're not going to be part of the China group. We want to be part of the sovereign nation group. So the sovereign individual predicted this. If you ever want to read a blueprint, read that book. I understand right now it's hard to get hold of this book. It's almost impossible because everyone's buying it. This is a 1995 book that pretty much teaches everything that's coming and how it was going to happen. And everything that we're seeing now is what this book said would happen. And it said it would be taking a long time. So I'm personally predicting we've got about another 10 to 15 years of this playing out to come into the change. That's my prediction.
Agenda 2030, Warren.
Sorry?
Agenda 2030.
Yes, I see that by 2032, Paul, for some reason that seems to be a significant year. I think it'll be very clear which of those three camps you're in.
Gotcha.
So it'll be one of those three. So you got basically, I think you got 4 years. We've got to sort our financial freedom out. I think we've got 12 years before the verdict is concluded. So, but I think after 4 more years, I think it'll be very hard if you haven't made your choice or haven't taken steps. So Rome was eventually invaded by a ruthless foe. And as I said here, we just don't really learn from communism, as it seems. And the reality is that time goes on, and when you read the history of civilizations, is that a civilization goes down a dark path, the next generation comes in and changes it, the next generation after that saw what happened to the old one, and they're generally behaving a lot better. The one after that's forgotten what happened before, and it goes all back in cycles. So, I mean, people who saw communism at work in Russia and the Soviet Union and the collapse of the wall in the 70s and 80s would be very aware of what this means. And I find that with clients, generally people who are 30 and under have no idea what this really means. And that's why most people 30 and under, and even my own partner at one stage was saying, oh, I think it's a great idea. Own nothing, we'll be happy. Let's have a universal basic income. And I had to patiently explain to her what this meant. Now she's well and truly converted. So debt is soaring because when you've got a system based on paper debt and election politics, and governments just want to get elected, they'll just keep printing money because it keeps pushing up stock markets. That, by the way, is why I'm predicting we're going to be seeing a lot of gains in the next little while. We've already seen Bitcoin go from 5,000 to like 40,000 and back to 30,000. I personally believe we've got more to come yet of that kind of stuff. I think we're going to be seeing some cryptos go north. I'm getting ready myself for it. I reckon we're going to be seeing some stocks go north. I think there's going to be a lot of money made in the next little while. I don't know how long, but sometime in the next maybe 6 months, 12 months, even longer. But I also do predict that we're going to be seeing a very major meltdown, which is going to be the impetus for the Great Reset. So knowing the times and preparing for it is critical right now. And that is why the rich are fleeing. They're investing, but they're also taking steps. I know right now that many of, I've got a group of friends who are in a psychic remote viewing community, and all of them have moved to regional areas, for example, because they see what they see coming in major cities. And many others have been moving to change their residency. And even those who are local, living in a country like Australia or US or anywhere, are being very precise as to where they're living and creating themselves to be fluid in movement. And that's certainly what we're doing. So in terms of the Great Reset and what this means, again, I'm just giving a few excerpts of slides. These are all just fancy mind control words to say we're getting rid of capitalism and we're bringing in socialism, because you can't trust big business to look after you. Only you can trust the government, because we'll do the right thing by you and we'll make sure you get an income and get looked after. And somehow, you have to excuse my skepticism in trusting them and their motives. So no question in my mind that the Great Reset in some form will see a cash burning up like that. We will see cash being taken out. This is just my prediction, and this I could well be wrong on. I think we've got to live month by month on this. I think this has got a little bit longer to play out than some think, just because time tends to not always go as fast as we think it's going. I think that it's possible that the Great Reset could happen this year. I personally think it's more likely that it will be happening a little bit after this year. I think there's a bit more to play out. If I'm right in that, I think there's a lot of money to be made in the next little while before but in saying that, as we make profits, cashing out and putting them into various investments or whatever else. So in plain English, this is how, when I've read through very carefully the Great Reset agenda, and by the way, I'm just simply saying what they've said. I'm not making this up here. They've actually said this. They've said higher taxes, including wealth taxes, more laws, more money printing, and governments dipping into retirement savings to fund government stimuluses. So in other words, if you have super or retirement, they're seeing it as a good chance to look after everyone else who's suffering and use your money to look after the suffering people. In other words, they won't use their money, they'll use yours. Government ownership of businesses and corporations. They're already talking in America about some compulsory government ownership of certain companies. Greater control and tracking of the individual. So hence why my personal belief is vaccinations is not really about health. It's about getting people ready so that they can chip solutions into you that will ink your body, that will make you a digital passport, and eventually a microchipped individual that will connect your soul and your spirit to a centralized computer system, which will probably be sold on some kind of level of, and I think they'll be right on this, that they'll tell people who've got Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, we can heal you. And because they connect to your central nervous system, they'll be able to put a program in and fix you. I wouldn't be surprised. That's just me guessing, but I have a feeling that soul control from the centralized computer systems initially will seem amazing because they will give you superpowers, so to speak. But in the longer term, it will pretty much mean they can set up a social credit system and a taxation and fining system to stop your flow of money if you're naughty, and even put in the program if you move more than 5 kilometers from your home, but instantly your money shuts off until you apologize to the system. So this is where I see eventually it going, and in parts of the world, but go the New World Order route and China route. So hence why the sovereign nation route is very much what you want to be looking at. And this is me being a bit of the spiritual teacher side of me. There's an old saying that the kingdom of heaven is within you, or that in science, they're now teaching in conscious science that your outer world reflects your inner work. So I'm telling my clients right now, but first focus on your own frequency and your own mindset and get yourself into a sovereign state financially and in your thinking. And then that will make it easier for you to attract yourself to places that will actually enable you to have your sovereignty. So the short answer is this is a terrible agenda. It pretty much is saying to you, you will become a slave and you'll be putting your full trust in a beast computer system to take care of your soul, your life, your spirit, your mind, everything. So being sovereign, which means you have the power over your own life and over your freedom, and governing yourself with no interference from any outside sources or bodies, which means you control your life. And This is something that I'm studying myself, like on an even deeper level, week by week. I mean, every webinar I'm doing each week is different, as those who work with me closely know, because I'm studying everything from sovereignty in a financial sense to a wealth asset owning sense, even to a spiritual sense and a health way of thinking sense and things like that. So taking steps to plan your taxes and your wealth can make a very big difference long term. And one of the first things I say to people who are new to sovereignty, I say at the very least, make sure you're not giving away any money to governments you don't have to. So this is just an example of what happens when you invest over the long term, the difference between having sovereign tax planning and not having it. And Peter Martin, who was a Sydney Morning Herald journalist, was very annoyed at me 4 years ago because he wrote an article which I basically quoted him, and he wrote to me saying, I don't like the fact you're quoting my article in the positive sense. I was meant to be having a go at this group. So he was showing how 54 of the 56 richest Australians paid no tax at all. And he concluded, and he pretty much concluded that tax is optional in Australia. It comes down to how much you're willing to pay a tax advisor and how well you know the system. And I pretty much said in my blog, which I quoted him, I said, if someone walked into my office and put 200 grand in my bank account or 300 grand and said, I just don't want to pay tax and I want it to be legal, I could do that for them. It's not a difficult thing to do. So the short answer is, if you're willing to take the steps and really do what it takes, you can get sovereign, you can plan your tax, you can protect your wealth. There's many things that you actually can do, and the elite know this. They know it's ignorance that actually stops people from getting the results they're looking for, and know why most people will be slaves. I do upset a lot of people in my blogs and posts because I frequently say things like, and I do this to try and wake people up, just as my motivation, is that I see the slave mentality that comes out, and I'll deliberately say to them, well, it sounds like you're going to be a slave. In other words, slavery, I personally think that most people will get vaccinated in the end, and most people will end up losing their freedoms because most people want it. Over 50% want to be locked down and things like that. It's mind-blowing to think about that, but unfortunately it's true. So in the meantime, while everyone else is working out their shit in their mind, so to speak, we've got to really do whatever we've got to do, because unfortunately the majority's ideas do affect the minority, as we've seen through history. So that's why it's so important to take radical plans. So my mentor taught me the 7 flags of sovereignty that he said is very important. Now, I've got my own 7 flags in terms of other areas of life, but in terms of financially, as a rule, having correct structuring, having a cash flow generating business, number 2, and feel free to take a screenshot of this slide if you want to. I've got no problem with that. I don't go copywriting and all that kind of stuff, simply because end of the day, as I see it, I'm giving back. The more the knowledge can get out, the better. So feel free to take a screenshot of this one if you want to. Investment base, family office, which means some kind of way where you're not got all your money vulnerable in one country or in one little place, where someone can make a decision while sitting there having a drink at a roulette wheel and take away all your money from you. A second citizenship, which means having somewhere you can go to where if the crap hits the fan. Having a tax residency, which means somewhere other than Australia or your main home country, but wants to take half your money. Going dark. We're seeing the big tech censorship with Facebook and Twitter, and they're very clever. They've got the whole world dependent on them. That's why my personal prediction all along is that Donald Trump, back when he lost his election in the fraud, I said, no, he's not going to come back, despite what's going around the internet. But I said he will come back in another form. I predicted about 6 weeks ago, he'll start his own social media company in opposition to Facebook and Twitter. And he's now hinted at that. And my prediction is that he will literally, it will go gigantic. So if he pulls that off, I personally think you're going to get a whole alternate social media coming out. So going dark, digital privacy. And the other one is legacy, giving back. So that's a big one. This number 7, I have to add, and this is what my mentor agrees with me on. This is one of the biggest problems why I believe we're facing the Great Reset. If in capitalism as a society, we had been giving back a lot and helping what's called the forgotten people, I don't reckon we'd be having even talked about a Great Reset. I think most people would be throwing it down. But unfortunately, many have missed out. So part of the new evolution of wealth that I'm seeing is that I believe we will see a great wealth transfer. A lot of awakened people will make wealth. And all I say to people is learn from the mistakes of the previous generations. And let's make sure that as part of any wealth blueprint, there's a legacy plan. This is something that why I love my mentor. He works with 100 million minimum people. These days, he works with a lot of my clients and works with people and gives back a lot. He said, because I want to awaken people and use my knowledge to help people not lose their freedoms and their wealth. And so there's many good people like him and others now that are giving back on an immense scale, and they're not doing it for the money. They're doing it to actually help humanity. So it's great what's happening. So there's been all kinds of things. And just to give you a bit of a snapshot, there was a currency reset in 1930, 33, thereabouts, when American lost their savings. There was a kind of indirect currency reset in 1975, when the dollar pegging currency reset. So every 90 years or 80, 90 years, there's normally a full reset, and there's a partial every 45 to 50. That's what seems to be the case from history. So great reset, I put 2021. I personally think it's more likely to be 2022, but who knows? The main thing is just whenever it happens, we've got to be moving and preparing now. So just a quick thing before we go into some solutions. This is speaking to the converted, so I won't really spend much time on these. This is probably the big thing to be aware about. Markets are doing crazy stuff right now. I do believe there's some great opportunities, but at the same time, I emphasize that as things are soaring up, there are going to be some soaring downs. So you've got to make sure that your wealth growth strategy is well managed and what's called following correct portfolio management principles, which I'll share a bit on shortly. Very important. My observation is most people lose a lot of money in these times. And for example, in the last crypto boom, the reason why a lot of people lost so much money was by not following portfolio management. And most of you who lost money in the 2016-17 boom, I guarantee you that you probably were overcapitalized in certain investments, like in your cryptos or something else. So even now with cryptos going up, I'm still not heavily capitalized in that compared to other stuff. So not the time to be in denial, because I mean, we're seeing all this, and I'm unfortunately predicting we'll see more of this. I think you're going to be seeing this kind of stuff happen, especially in US and part of Europe. I think Australia, very possibly parts of our country too. And no one likes to see this kind of stuff happening. And this is the kind of stuff that's potentially looming right now. And that's why the more sovereign you can be, the more easier it will actually be for you to be prepared for this. And I have to emphasize on this bank bail-in, which means in simple terms, the government can basically take your money to help a bank out. Once they pass laws, they tend to use them, as we saw with this crazy law here, and even now, just as a little side issue, I still notice that most people don't really understand what's happened, even on the supposed awakened groups. It's like I told someone, none of your premiers actually run your states anymore. It's the chief health officer of your state. So whoever the chief health officer is your state is actually your premier now. If you actually understand how a state of emergency works and the law, it's your chief health officer. So find out whoever that is, that's who's running your state. Your premier is just acting on their instructions. So to put it simply, no one wants to be the wealthiest one. So the next question is, how do you protect your wealth and how do you take advantage of the opportunities? So let's just quickly go through this. I'll just check the time. Yep, I've still got about 10, 15 minutes. So safety first. And all what I'm saying about opportunity, that's the first thing I'm emphasizing. Safety first. Now, my experience, a very good financial planner once told me this. He said, in times of boom, most people are overly optimistic. And in times of recession, most people are overly pessimistic. So you take someone in the middle of a crypto boom, for example, and say to them, are you risk averse or are you willing to take risks? They'll be, oh man, I'm willing to take risks. You know, I'm a risk taker. I'm willing to put myself on the line, and I'm this entrepreneur. I can make money. You meet that same person who said that in 2017, halfway through the year. You meet them 6 months later, or 12 months, or sorry, 18 months later, end of 2018. Nah, mate, I'm pretty risk averse. You know, I'm cautious. You know, I know how easy it is to get burnt. And suddenly now they're the ultimate pessimist, and they miss the next opportunity. So the way you avoid it, it's a little bit like your heart in a relationship. Many people get hurt and wounded because they meet someone, they feel attracted to them, and they open their heart out really wide when the other person as yet haven't really proven themselves to them. And then that other person doesn't meet their expectations, what they believe in now, where their heart is wide open, they're fantasizing about being with them, they're imagining soulmates walking by the beach, sitting there staring at the sunset. And then suddenly they find that person's dating someone else at the same time, which in their mind wasn't a problem because they were just kind of like pretty new. And they feel devastated, they feel cheated on, they walk around telling them you can't trust men or trust women. And all it was a failure to apply safety first. Rather than saying, okay, well, let's get to know each other, let's spend time, let's see each other, I'll open my heart to you deeper once I know that you're going to give me a commitment that you'll take care of my heart, and vice versa. And since I applied safety first in relationships and with women, I've had a great run. I don't get hurt in these things these days. So the same thing can apply for you with your finances. Safety first. Don't invest in stuff you don't understand. Don't put money that you're not willing to lose. And understand that anything that you're doing is a gamble. And I mean anything. And this was one of the best, wealthiest mentors I've worked with, who pretty much told me that investing and wealth protection is a mathematical game. The truth is, there's nothing that I can teach you today that doesn't have a risk. Cash has a risk because the government can reset the currency tomorrow. Gold has a risk because the government can confiscate it. Digital gold held in Singapore in a private vault has a risk because you might be locked out from getting to Singapore and the guys might go bankrupt and run off with the gold. Bonds have a risk because it could be default and not paying on them. Private companies are a risk because they can be stolen, or they can go broke. Cryptocurrencies are a risk because really they're just a concept. They're not actually a physical asset as such as we know it. So the point is, there's nothing I can tell you today that doesn't have a risk. So how does the super wealthy billionaire and the oligarchs invest, but the average person don't? The answer is, if you study their investment principles, which I've done over and over and over and over and over and over again, they actually do what's called a measured portfolio. So what they do is they follow something like the Harry Browne. I'm not saying they all do, but this is what's called the Harry Browne model portfolio. So what Harry Browne said is that you have your wealth, and this is a very generic concept because people say, well, where's property and where's this? Look, this is a generic concept. Many of the super rich these days are not doing much property because simply they said the weakness with property is what? It's the easiest thing for governments to tax. When governments want more money, what are they doing in New York and California right now where they've run out of money? They're just hiking up taxes on property. So property, and I'm not saying don't invest in property, just be mindful that property is one of the easiest things to tax and one of the easiest assets to confiscate if governments decide one day they want to take your wealth. It's a very easy asset. It's a bully asset, I call it. Easy for a bully to get his hands upon it. So in saying that, if you're going to look at property, you might put that into the private investments, or you might slightly adapt this in your own way, like 10% private, 10% property, or whatever. The point I'm showing you here is that all these different asset classes are being spread. The 20% private investments is an opportunity for growth in companies that could go somewhere. I invest in these, and some of these have done very well. Some of them don't. Overall, I've done much better than on the ones I have and lost on the ones I haven't. Cryptocurrencies, well, they would go in there too. I personally, in the Browne portfolio, see Bitcoin more in the precious metals category because it's more like a digital gold for me. So I mix it between precious metals and a bit of Bitcoin. I don't trade Bitcoin myself. I invest long term as a form of digital gold. Private investments, that might be some altcoins that you might decide after some research could potentially 10x your money this year. So you can see here though, that a portfolio like this leaves you more covered and leaves you less vulnerable. Because if you're wrong and cryptocurrencies and gold go nowhere and stocks go 10x in the next year, and some are predicting the Dow is going to go absolutely feral, well, then you're going to benefit from it. If bonds suddenly do especially well, and one of my best mentors has made a lot of money with the US Treasury bonds, just trading it and buying bonds, and buying them at a time when everyone else has lost confidence in a government bond or a corporate bond, he buys into them. So the point is, having a balanced portfolio concept and a wise education around investments, so you actually understand these different things, it's less exciting, but in the long term, you will actually take advantage of the opportunities. And my friend who's made an absolute fortune doing this kind of stuff, he told me he made at age 18, he made $300,000 a year doing professional sports betting, just simply using algorithms and statistical models and using model portfolios to analyze risk. And he actually offered to teach 10 professional gamblers who were losing money how to do it as a giving back service. All of them declined his offer because, as he said to me, he goes, most people who gamble and trade and invest, they're doing it for the excitement rather than to make money. They won't tell you that, but they're doing it for an emotional fix. So what I'm showing you today is the most boring stuff you'll ever see in your life. It's the most unexciting, but this stuff is what the wealthy do. So precious metals like gold and silver, and knowing that it's not just a case of buying gold at the Perth Mint or the Queensland Mint. There's risk with that. You might decide to buy some gold in the mint. You might also decide to buy some gold offshore in a digital vault. So this means if you get confiscated in Australia, you've still got some wild gold overseas. If your gold overseas you lose access to, you've got some in Australia. So this is the kind of concepts. Same with blockchain, same with cryptos. Having a safe haven, that's why regional property prices are literally going through the roof and why everyone's buying them pretty much instantly. So because they're wanting a safe haven. Rural land, one of my clients who buys farms just said, when a farm comes up for sale, they've got to move fast because within hours it generally is selling right now because people now are realizing the need for food. A very popular asset is gems and jewelry because why? Well, if gold gets confiscated, what they're finding is people who are fleeing borders and lose their gold at the border crossing, they tend to leave the jewelry alone that they're wearing. So this has become quite popular, expensive jewelry. Art is another thing that, of course, at one stage in the Rich 200 list of best performing assets, the two highest performing was actually art and wine collections at one stage, even higher than stocks, shares, gold, anything. And generally, in the long term, over 40 years, art and wine are one of the highest performing investments. One of the things that one of my $130 million clients, he is right now going heavily into buying land or anything to do with food, energy, and health. And I think that goes without saying. No one cares about gold if you don't have food or don't have health. You can't eat gold, and gold won't get you better. So ultimately, food, energy, and health, which means in companies doing this, and most importantly, in your own food, your own energy, and your own health. I would probably put my biggest investment of my time right now into my food, energy, and health. Raising my spiritual energy. I do daily clearings and meditations because right now the planet is so toxic, and I'm sure we all know what I mean. I find if I skip a day of clearing, I feel dirty by the evening. So I do clearings daily. I'm getting out, connecting with Mother Earth and the grass. I'm doing connecting with cosmic source through my crown chakra. Hopefully this doesn't sound too strange, but I just do energy clearing on myself to help me stay clean. I make sure I eat really, really, really well, like excellent food, and make sure I keep my energy high. So tax structuring, I always recommend people at the very least, you want to be well structured in Australia. Foundations right now are very popular, I'm finding, not just offshore foundations, but many of my contacts who've been selling offshore foundations are now coming to me asking about Australian foundations because as a former tax officer who used to be a specialist in charities and foundations, I operate a lot of my works now through a foundation, which is a spiritual consciousness foundation to give back. But through your foundation, you can also not only give back as a legacy, but there are some tremendous tax benefits, 100% legally, which you can get if correctly structured and correctly approved. So I know Paul does foundations as well, private, which are great for some. I say to people who do that, you go see that. We do what's called public foundations, where we structure them, get approval from the tax office and the Charities Commission, but I also put special clauses in our foundations that maintain our sovereignty. So some of the other things I'll allude to that many of the wealthy are doing: the second passport. You can get some great tax residency options now in places like Panama, in places like Malta. I am predicting that with COVID and lockdowns, there's now some places already that are talking about online e-residencies, so you can get an online residency. A lot of people are getting their tax residencies overseas, because once you're a non-resident of Australia, you're tax-free. And the beautiful thing about it is, unlike America, the law is still very, very, very pro in favor of taxpayers. The 2019 federal court decision in Harding, they pretty much said that provided that you've actually shown a clear intention to become a non-resident and got yourself a place overseas, you're a non-resident, which is very different to say what America and many other Western countries require, or England. So Australia has a unique position right now compared to other Western countries. We have very liberal residency laws. So I don't know if it'll stay that way, but for now, if you're thinking of becoming a non-resident, it's a good time, because right now our laws are very liberal and it's very easy to do it. I'm predicting that will change as governments run out of money. They'll start clamping down to try and keep more money in-house. So offshore structures, if not for tax planning, at the very, very least for asset protection. So for example, if you've got an offshore structure in Hong Kong or somewhere, and you lose your money in Australia, or the government comes after your Australian company, your Hong Kong company can give you a layer of protection. This is why the wealthy do it, or your Cook Islands Foundation, or your Seils Foundation, or Seils Trust. So offshore banking, and getting an offshore bank account is harder these days than ever. You've got to work with the best agents to do that. We have to work pretty hard to find agents who can do that. We do have that still right now. So generally getting a good asset protection for the Great Reset, getting a good place to live, getting your residency sorted out. So in summary, what I'm recommending, or I'm saying to everyone, is even if you're going to stay in Australia, or stay where you are in US, or stay where you are in UK, get yourself a backup option. It doesn't mean you have to move out of there, but like as one of my clients told me recently, who was locked down in Melbourne for months, and he's now exercised his second citizenship option he had set up in Switzerland, and he's moving there. The thing was, he had that choice. Now, many other people don't have that choice. So the question is, this is not about telling you to go and uproot your life. I'm sharing today, create yourself choice. Second citizenship, second passport, residency, make sure your wealth's protected, well diversified. Many of the high net worth even teach that if you're spending up to 5% of your money every year just in keeping it, you're being wise. So don't be afraid to spend a good amount of money to protect your wealth, diversify your wealth portfolio, get yourself a second passport, get yourself a second place somewhere else to get away to if you have to escape, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully you'll never have to use it. That's the best case scenario. So always better to have a choice than not to have a choice. So it's a good time to take charge, take decisions today while there's still time, while it's still possible, and while it's still able to be done. And as the Great Reset looms closer, I'm predicting it will change. So it's a good time to be wise, and it's a very good time to get educated, to take advantage of the opportunities, because I'm telling you, I mean, I am really excited. So when Paul said, what's the good news? The good news is it's a wealth transfer. People like many of you and myself and others who maybe couldn't access many of the opportunities quite so easily two years ago, they're coming up for everyone now. I'm seeing opportunities come our way that are unique, stuff I haven't seen before. We're seeing doors open. Our business, which we're in, because we're a smaller company, because the world has moved online now and less physical, and because we've got a very good Google presence, our business is really taking off this year. It's been the last 12 months we've taken off. I'm finding that online businesses, people who are small companies, got the opportunity to become big companies because online world gives a new playing field. There's investment opportunities coming up, which are unique. You'll be seeing like massive crashes and massive rises. And if you can learn to manage your emotions and learn to understand how to take advantage of these opportunities and buy as things go really quickly and then sell when they go really quickly, all I can say is that I see the next 3 or 4 years could be you could make more money in the next 3 years that you've made in the last 20 or 30 years and can set you up for life. And so it's a great opportunity to take it, use these few years while there's still time. So lots of good news there. So my summary, my 3 pieces of advice for you before we take questions, is that take a worst case scenario. I do that with all areas of my life. My mentor once said to me, treat your business like it's in crisis, and it won't be. So I always look at my business worst case scenario. 3 times that saved me from losing my company because I looked at it from a worst case scenario. So look at your assets. What happens? Are you vulnerable right now? Are you too heavily invested in one thing? Are you well structured? What about where you're living? What about your family? Do you have money diversified overseas? If you don't, and you're complacent, it's a good time to give yourself a bit of a wake-up call and a bit of a fright. It's a good fright to get, because then you go, yikes, I'm in a bit of a shit, I better move. And fear is good if you take action. I don't mind a bit of fear and a wake-up call and getting a bit, oh shit, because it gets you moving. Get specialist advice. I work with experts in all areas of my life. Health, right now with financial, I've got a couple of good mentors. I've got a business coach, we've got a financial. Even though in theory we don't need it, my attitude is if Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer need a tennis coach, I need a business coach and I need wealth coaches because they will keep me growing. If Michael Jordan and LeBron James, then I need one too. And the wealthy stay ahead of the game by being sovereign and staying educated and being in the right community of like-minded people. And on that note, Paul, over to you, and anyone who'd like to ask me any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And hopefully that served you and given you some good stuff.
Okay, great. Thanks, Warren. So has anyone got any questions? I'm just checking through some stuff in the chats. I've got a couple of chats that are running at the moment. Is there anyone that's on the live webinar that's got any questions for Warren at all? Some people are bringing questions up and raised it in the chat, Warren, about dual passports and foreign passports.
I'm not really seeing them, Paul. I've seen one now. The cons of a private public foundation versus a private.
Oh no, we're running it through the other feed as well. So that's that one there. There's also questions about.
You ask me the questions, Paul, and I'll answer them. That's the easiest.
Okay, great. We'll do that then. Yeah. So what about the options as far as dual citizenships or foreign residency?
Okay. Panama is very popular because it's relatively low cost compared to others, and it's fairly easy to get. That's one. In terms of passports, generally the more money you've got, the easier. Like if you've got a lot of money, you can buy it in some places in the Caribbean. One of my clients got it in Switzerland. Another one's looking in Montenegro. Many of these countries, like or even like in Mallorca. So if you've got a lot of money, or like Malta, and you're willing to buy or invest into a place, then there's a lot of places you can go to. And it also depends on your purpose. If you're wanting to retire somewhere, Costa Rica is very popular. If you're wanting somewhere where you can travel around a bit more easily, Panama, for example, Thailand and Bali were very popular at one stage for people who are retirees. Bali probably less so now, because as you probably heard, they just lost the plot with this whole COVID thing. But yeah, there's plenty of things.
Yep. People are also asking about thoughts on Vanuatu as a residency, banking and asset protection jurisdiction.
I don't use it myself, Brad. I've not saying it's not good. It's a little bit like buying a car in a car yard. You know, there might be 100 different cars you can buy, and you might like 5 or 6 of them. I'm cautious of Vanuatu because it's so close to Australia, and I kept away from it. And that was the first country targeted when the ATO did a blitz in 2004 with Wickenby, and many people got burnt. I don't like Vanuatu because they're very much in bed with Australia, despite what they tell you. Yep. So I don't like it myself for that reason.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Warren. Could you please explain the pros and cons of a public foundation versus a private one?
Look, it depends on what you're using it for. Private foundations like the Cook Islands and Seils and others are very good for asset protection, like very, very good. Tax minimization, it depends. It really depends, because the tax office do not take the view that private foundations work to minimize tax in Australia. They've gone to court on it a few times and they've won every time. So my position on that is I have better things to do with my life and pick a fight with the beast. And even though private foundations, most people I know haven't had a problem with them, because by and large the ATO don't really seem to pay much attention to them. I just prefer to use private foundations for protection, and I've found a way with public foundations to use them to get tax minimization 100% legally with the ATO and the ACNC approving it. So, but in saying that, I mean, yeah, so that's my opinion on it personally, is I use private foundations more for wealth protection and public more for giving back and tax minimization. I prefer to use them in tandem, is the short answer. So I tend to use them together.
Also for privacy as well, Warren, because of the government surveillance of being able to, government departments being able to view accounts and that sort of thing as well.
Correct. Yeah, privacy. I would agree. That's why I like to use them in tandem.
Great. How to transfer personal assets into discretionary trusts? So I guess, family trust, discretionary trust, etc. Is that through gifting?
Through gifting. The thing to be mindful of is that if you got a capital gain, you'll have to pay a tax on that. So generally we have to do a minimization strategy, because people ask, is there any way to avoid that? The short answer is no. You can minimize it, or there are ways you can get around it indirectly by doing what's called the transitional phase strategy that we use. But yes, so it can be done. Gifts is generally the common way of doing it, or transfers, but it's saying that sometimes a loan can be better if you're looking for tax deductibility. So it always depends on purpose.
Okay, great. I don't see any more questions that are coming through. So how do people, so we've got a Telegram channel that people want to join. So for Telegram, if you go to www.t.eme, just get again, T for telegram.me/Paul Seils Associates. If there's any questions that you have for myself or Warren, how else do people get in contact with you, Warren?
Okay, I'll just go through the options. What's next? Well, I'll just show people how, with everyone's permission, if you do want to get in contact with us, what to do. So 3 choices that you've got in how to deal with the Great Reset, as I see it. First one is just, hopefully that's none of you, but just do what everyone else is doing and bury your head in the sand and just kind of pretend it's not actually happening. The second thing is to just see a current accountant if you've got someone who knows what they're doing. My experience is that most people who come to my webinars don't have that luxury, so that's why they've come. The third one is to get some specialist help on protecting yourself from the Great Reset and come safely through on the other side. So that's where we can come in. So if that's what you're more looking for and you'd like some kind of help, there's 2 ways that we can help, that we work with people. 2 ways. The first way is if you actually want specialist advice. So if you're wanting absolute specialist advice, it depends on the kind of advice. Generally, it's with my business partner, which is on tax and wealth protection. So she does a lot of that, and she's brilliant, like absolutely brilliant. I've trained her from a puppy, or as I tease her about, from a baby. We're best friends, by the way, Vina and I. We're very, very close, and we give each other heaps. So when I say that, there's no disrespect. Vina and I get on great. We're very good friends, and from a baby, really. I've known her for 10 years, and she came and wanted to work with me, and we worked together. So she knows everything about the sovereignty. She's brilliant. She's a very successful crypto investor and trader herself. Actually better at it than me, I hate to say, but she's better at it than me. I think women generally are better investors than men because they're more disciplined. Sorry, men. But basically, no hourly rates. So this is how she works. So if you're wanting specialist advice, do I do any with clients? I do, but more with the option 2, and I'll explain that. So option 2 is where you're not only wanting high-level advice, but you're actually quite interested in some education on the Great Reset and how to take advantage of the opportunities. So we run a club, which actually not only where you can get advice, but where you get regular education, access to high-level contacts, and you can learn how to take advantage of the opportunities ahead. So you can actually make a lot of money with not just cryptos, but cryptos is probably a minor part of what we do because they're better people than us. It is one part. It's mainly the private equity opportunities, and all that kind of stuff, as well as teaching on protection, wealth, and stuff like that. So the first option is where you just want advice. And what we do, just to be clear, is Vina's happy to have an initial call with people just to go through with you for 30 minutes, no obligation, no cost, where she will discuss with you and see if we can assist you. And this one, we're the same with this club here. We're happy to have a call with you. And my business partner with the Wealth Club, who's Grace, who's my, of all things, my former wife and mother of my kids, and now business partner. And actually sitting, I think she's still on this webinar. Yes, she is. Hi, Grace. So Grace is actually on here right now, listening in. So, yep. So she helps me run the Wealth Club and make sure we've got the opportunities and available and things like that. So depending on whether you're just simply interested in finding out more about advice solutions, then that's option one. Option two is you're also interested to find out a little bit more about the community, no obligation, just have a chat with someone. So if you want to do that, just send your information to Paul and let him know, because that way it makes it easier if Paul then can send it to us and let us know, and then we'll get in contact with you. So if that's okay, Paul. That's
that's great, Warren. So that information, get in contact with me through the Telegram channel. I've posted it in the link and I'll post it in the video as well. Or you can also get and reach me via my website, which is paulseils, SEILS.com, and jump on there and book a time for a session as well, and we can have a chat and get that sorted out for you as well. So thank you for your time, Warren. It's been very enlightening. Anything else that you'd like to leave us with in closing?
Look, my main thing I'd leave everyone with is thank you for listening to what we've got to share, and I appreciate it more because the more people that are keen and hungry for this and can go out and take action and then hopefully tell 10 other people, we can really, I think we can see a huge shift. You know, if we have a big enough group of people, I personally believe Australia could become a sovereign nation, so to speak, or parts of it. I think there's a lot of awakened people in Australia from my experience. I've been around many countries of the world. Australia has a unique level of awakened people, I'm noticing. And look, whatever you do, whether you take action with us, just keep on this path, keep educating yourself, keep taking action. And if you do want to work with us, yeah, we'd love to talk to you, and make sure you stay connected with Paul and his team as well. And let's just do something. Let's spread the word. Let's educate people, because if we can get 40% of Australia awake, well, we're a strong enough voice where we can't be ignored and at least be recognized and acknowledged. So thank you, everyone, just for listening and being willing to educate yourself. That's my final comments.
Thanks, Warren. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for joining us. And we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.